structures on the site, and we've already caused changes.
New governance submitted. We are live. Wonderful. Welcome to the Senate Government Operations Committee. It is Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. And today we're going to be taking up H 649, which is an act relating to the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm going to have the committee introduce themselves because many of you, perhaps all of you, have not been in this committee before. Chair Hardy is in the Finance Committee, but represents the Addison District.
I'm Olivia Parker, the committee assistant.
Tanya Vyhovsky, I represent the Chittenden Central District.
Hi, I'm Rebecca White, and I serve the Windsor County District.
And here would normally be Senator Bob Norris, who represents the Franklin District and the town of Alberg.
Ann Watson for the Washington District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Wonderful. And our first witness today is Mia Schultz, who is a commissioner on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Mia, take it away. You want to just introduce yourself for the record?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry.
No worries.
That's our favorite phrase these days. You're muted. Sorry about that. My name is Mia Schultz. I use she, her pronouns. I am one of currently two commissioners for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we have another commissioner and other people to introduce as well. Sorry.
Wonderful. Yeah, if you want to start with your testimony, I don't prepared testimony.
Or are they doing it together?
Or are you doing it together?
Well, so here's the thing. So we didn't prepare anything particularly because we weren't sure what you needed to hear in terms of this is our second go around. Our legislation's already in place. We're just asking for some additional supports.
Yeah.
So as a team, we were going to come here and talk about all of the additional supports that we're looking for. One in particular is the obviously we need a third commissioner, and the initial legislation didn't include a mechanism to bring on another commissioner. So that is one of our primary reasons for being here today. With that caused sort of a delay in our work because we're working without a full team. And so we are also looking for an extension as well, because as you know, our work is pretty ambitious to begin with. And so to in order to do this work with integrity, we are requesting that extension. Commissioner Mackin, if you want to add upon that and some of the other requests, and then our general legal counsel is also here to talk about some of the other issues that we see that could potentially help us with this work to do it in a way that's safe and inclusive.
If it makes the most sense to welcome your general counsel to the table, the three of you can really testify together, and
Great.
that's
Yes,
fine
please.
for us.
Yes,
Perfect.
please.
So if Melody and Michelle, if you want to also introduce yourself for the record, we can have kind of an organic conversation if you want to sort of lay out to us what is the problem we're trying to solve, which you did, and what's in the bill and why we should support it. That would be awesome.
And my God, does the third commissioner have to have a name that begins with an M also? So they're all united.
I don't think
Right.
that's so Melody, if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Melody Mackin, and I use she and her pronouns, and I am one of currently two commissioners at this point. So thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
I'm Michelle Olvera, she, her, in general legal counsel. I'm not a commissioner.
Wonderful. And I will let the three of you take it away. I may interrupt you if committee members have questions, but take it away.
Okay. Yeah, so like I originally said, we are really the whole reason we're really started this process to ask for either amendment, I guess in this case it's a new legislative process, was to add a mechanism for appointing another commissioner. And also to ask for an extension The other things that we're looking for, I would like to refer to our general legal counsel around safety and open meeting. So Michelle, can you take it from there about what we're looking for in that particular piece?
Yes, so in that particular piece, there's a couple pieces to it. One is about the public meeting.
Sorry, this starts, the concerns that you're about to represent are sections 10, 11, and
I'm gonna say, yeah, section 9
9
and
10.
10. Yeah.
Right.
So about public meetings. It currently says that we can have a public meeting without having a physical location. The other important piece to that, which is a little bit different, is that if we receive a material threat
Yes.
to the commission, someone on the commission, one of our witnesses, someone that's working with commission that's gonna be at that meeting, we have the ability to have what we call a closed meeting. Now, a closed meeting means that we have a meeting that without public participating, that the public, which is in the bill, can live stream that meeting, they can still witness it. And we would invite people into that meeting.
So closed, sorry, does this clarify, closed meening just means that no one else can join you, but it doesn't mean
They
you're
can't
not live.
necessarily like raise their hand and participate in that meeting. They would have to just be watching
Quiet
the
and
live
watching.
stream. But
Right.
the commission can invite people, and it'd be hard for me to imagine that we wouldn't try to invite those continuing participating members of the public and obviously the press into the closed meeting.
Yeah, the
Our
point is-
original intent was like what we were facing when we first got this legislation was having had that threat and then having to have a physical location
Mhm.
where anyone could come, and that just didn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So we got,
Yeah, so a couple of questions that came up when council brought this to us is, I don't know if the commission is aware. This committee worked on S-55, which was an update to open meeting law. And in S-55, advisory boards are allowed to have all remote meetings. And we did clarify with our council that the commission is an advisory board. So regardless of what's happening, you would be allowed to have all remote meetings. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I did it. Thank you.
Yes, so that is an update that has passed this body and is now in the House. It's S-55.
Okay.
Now the language around all remote meetings does say they must be fully participatory, so your closed meeting is beyond that, and I can certainly understand why that would be necessary for protection, but I did want you to know that the all remote meeting ability is gonna be available to you regardless of whether or not there's a threat, because you do classify as an advisory committee under the new law.
well, thank you for letting us. And I think it would really be an extreme circumstance, we would have to go to a closed meeting,
Mhm.
but it's nice to have that.
Yeah.
If we feel like people's safety is threatened.
Yes.
And I'll just add a couple other notes. When we first actually were appointed, we there were safety concerns that came right away on the commissioners. So that was already something that's there. And literally in our last public meeting, we had impacted community members ask about safety and what we're doing to ensure safety, because these stories are so vulnerable, and we want to create an environment where safety is paramount, and we want to ensure that people have every access to safety. And I think this is just one of many tools that we would like to have in our toolbox. And so this will require you all to impart us that kind of power to do that.
Senator Ferguson.
So I heard you all allude to threats at the beginning when you were first gathering in your first set of witnesses. But have you had subsequent threats? I mean, have you feared for your safety subsequent?
Not in a direct way, but we have had some people join our meeting who have not necessarily agreed with what we're doing.
But that's,
but not direct.
that's all
but-
our meetings.
That's all of our meetings. Yes, I do. And but you also get to live stream too. So you don't get to hear. So it was about managing and facilitating that. I could imagine if somebody were not us and they were a person telling their story, having that sort of input from the community as a stressor while they're telling their story. It's not something that I want to impart on victims who are already being victimized, right? People who are being victimized. But to answer your question directly, no, we have not had any direct threats since then. But again, we haven't started taking testimony either.
Thanks. And good, that's good.
Yes, right. We say continue the meeting, there's sort of a 3-step process. We have rules about how you interact with each other. You know, and we've had to give some reminders. We haven't yet had to kick anyone out of the meeting or put them on involuntarily on mute. But that can happen too, and that might be enough.
Senator White.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I realize we kind of jumped into it without kind of a framing of what the process has been so far with the bill, and I apologize if we already did this at another point. But I guess I kind of have 2 larger questions, which is, the first one will be, so it's come to us from the House, passed the House. I'm wondering if there's any differences between what was introduced in the House versus what we see here, and if there were any changes that you would say were good, were bad, things that you'd like, what you wanted that wasn't quite in there. Love to get information on that and how you felt the process went on the House side. And then the other question I have is more personal, which is I really appreciate the work that you have been assigned to do, and I'm extremely grateful, especially to the 2 commissioners standing, who have continued to do the work. But how do you get a request or a submission to have a group or a situation looked at by the commission? And are you open to suggestions? Because I'd love to have the Fish and Wildlife Board potentially have some conversations with you on how they could take some of the conflict we've seen post S-258 and that conversation, how we could really address some of the heated rhetoric that felt very felt at times like a kind of a cultural reckoning. I don't know how you take those submissions, or if it's like someone submits a form, but I'd happily submit a form to connect a group of the hunters and non-hunters to come together and kind of see eye to eye on some of these big cultural questions that seem to play out in other ways. So those 2 big questions.
I love that you're thinking that way. Can I do the first part, Mia, and you do the second part, or Mel?
Of course.
The first part, Chair McCarthy was really we worked as a team with us to get where we are. We're happy with what has come out of it. There were some tweaks to it, and that was fine. Yeah, understood all of that.
Okay.
You want to talk about how we receive?
Before you jump to that, I want to just jump in. So what we did have Chair McCarthy in to walk us through the bill. And one of the things we did talk about is potentially making some alignment changes so it tracks more harmoniously with the changes in S-55. It wouldn't really be substantive, but just making sure, because they were aware of what would be in our open meeting policy, that it tracks with what we've done to change open meeting law. So I did want to just give you that heads up that that's a possibility, but I don't think it would be substantive.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I just to the first part of the question, just in terms of what happened in the House and any kind of changes. One of the changes that was made, we had asked for a way to be able to gather affinity groups, if you will. And so there was just some kind of just conflict around the word affinity, and right, so we just changed that name, but they would still basically be convened as groups of people with similar interests. So that change was okay, with similar identities or similar interests, similar backgrounds, right? So groups focus groups, if you will, from groups of people who are alike. So
And we did go through that somewhat excruciating process, and I'm looking at it right now under section 10, and it reads affinity group sessions, duty of.
oh, they left it in?
Oh, yeah. I think in section 10 they did.
So there was a whole thing about the word affinity groups. I'm glad it got left in.
Was fine with us.
I like the term affinity groups, isn't it?
It seems positive, right?
Yeah, okay.
So
But-
yeah, so that I just wanted to highlight that. In terms of the second part, I'll leave that for Commissioner Mackin to, kind of discuss what it might look like for the Fish and Wildlife and the groups to be able to talk. We are in a building and planning phase still. We're getting like kind of all the administrative pieces and what it might look like still, but Melody, talk about the vision.
Yeah. So, right now, anybody, if people want to submit any kind of feedback or they have requests or they want to take testimony, if they want to give testimony, which we haven't started doing yet, but we're getting there. We're working on completing our strategic plan soon. Then they can always message us. We're happy to have meetings with folks if they have questions. So what we've been doing is just as we're going, we're getting there. We're almost in this next phase. I'm very excited for it. And then we'll have a lot more capacity. So yeah, happy to take any requests. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it
And I
feels just like such an interesting group of people who I think could so benefit from having a non-policy space where they're not discussing what is and what isn't allowed under hunting practices, but instead just kind of meeting each other as people. I think it would be really powerful. So, and it feels like that's in part one of your purposes, is to help have people be able to have those difficult conversations about values and identity, and negative past situations. Yeah, so
I'm just going to pull back just a little bit because actually our purpose is to look at the laws and the policies and how they've been discriminatory. And so we might be making them feel a little bit uncomfortable over there. But I will say is that we are about relationship building. We are always in the relationship building business, right? And that means interstate agency relationship building. So I've now made a note that we need to have at least a preliminary meeting with the Fish and Wildlife folks, right? Like that is part of this process, is to look at our state agencies, look at our state laws and policies, and develop relationship and bring people together to be able to understand new truths, or not new truths, but not to us. They have always been our truths, but truths that maybe have not been heard or amplified in the past, and hopefully bring about a better understanding of a new or different way of looking at the world.
Thank you, and thank you for that correction on the work that you do, because that's exactly right.
Thank you.
Senator Clarkson, did you have a question?
Yes, so you're in the you're full-time, right? So you have developed a process that then, my guess is, Becca, that once they start the process, they'll be asking and organizing their meetings around specific questions, and then people will respond to some of those, I would assume. I mean, you're going to present an agenda and present areas you want to address, and then people, my guess is, will be more productive in their response and communicating with you about wanting to be heard about specific areas you're addressing.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. I guess my question for you, now that we're looking at a way to simplify that was a ridiculous process. I mean, I thought it was sort of ridiculously over the top, the process for selecting the three of you. And clearly it was, because you're asking to simplify it now. So the question I have for you is, what are you looking for the third? I mean, you have now, hopefully you'll have, by the time this passes, it's a simpler process. What are you looking for the third member? And what, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what do each of you, with only 3 people, what do each of you feel like you represent for that commission? And what are you looking for the third member to represent?
Well, what I would say, so to talk about your first part, we have monthly meetings. So anybody who wants to come every the first Tuesday of each month, when we've been having them for some time. So we love to get feedback. We've had some amazing feedback, which has totally helped with our vision or strategic planning. And we've had emblematic case meetings, which have been wonderful. We are finishing those, transitioning to educational offerings each month. So we've been doing lots of stuff. Right now, working full time, it's been, we're still in building and planning, so most of it's operational anyway, which nobody wants to come to watch us set up meetings. Like, that's just not necessary. But once we get into the next step, it'll be more significant. But, everything needs to be transparent anyway. And the second part of what you asked, can you just remind me?
Well, there are only three of you, and I'm just
Oh, yeah.
curious if each of you, as you look at a third member, what are you looking for that third member to represent? And what do you feel what areas do you feel each of you represent? What, in terms of what you're bringing to the commission?
So I'll answer for me because we'll use I statements first, and then Mia, if you want to go for it. Well, I don't know if the whole point of this mandate is to help uplift people's voices. And so rather than us representing any particular thing, I am here to help all of the impacted communities and to be somebody that people can talk to, can help bring this vision together so that we can allow people the platform to be able to tell their truths. So for me, I would love to have somebody that rounds out some of the skills maybe I don't have, or some of the things that that I'm not as familiar with. And so I don't know, I don't know, there's a bunch of things, but recognizing that we all have many intersectional identities, and we also we may bring a lot of things that I don't even know they bring. So I'm just looking for somebody that can work well on the team with us. And we have tons of community members. So if there's anything that we're missing at the end, we can bring people in and we can make a good team. So everything can be rounded out. I'm just hoping the whoever comes on is excited and is looking to do the same things that we're doing and uplifting people's voices, and not just being like, I don't want a token. I want somebody who wants to sit down with us and like really, really be intentional about this work, if that makes sense. Mia, do you have anything to add?
And Melody, I appreciate you saying that because I understand, well, there were sort of, maybe I shouldn't say this on camera. I think maybe I'll be, okay, yeah. Sorry, because I understood that maybe that one of the challenges is it was, I mean, you're absolutely right. We want great people and we want great commissioners who may or may not represent certain communities. And you're right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, basically we're not like we're not like in the box type of thinkers here. We're like, and that's the point of our work really, is to expand beyond kind of what we're acculturated to, right? And look at things from a different lens. And so if we, even in our work while we're planning, we're not specifically identifying people by identity. We're not blocking people and boxing people into those identity, because we know, first of all, that we come from many intersecting identities, and there's all kinds of ways that that is individual, right? So to say like our third commissioner should be this particular type of person would actually be antithetical to what our mission is and to what the way that we operate as commissioners here right now, and everything. So we are really looking forward to somebody who can see the world in that particular way, with cultural humility, with
culture what?
cultural humility,
Humility.
and to be able to hear the stories and believe them, right? This is a listening exercise.
Yeah,
And we need people in our sphere who can listen. And so if I'm looking for a third commissioner, I need and I get to pick that third commissioner, which I wouldn't want to anyway, but I would say it just needs to be somebody on par with that cultural humility and ability to listen and believe.
great, thanks, that's very helpful. I appreciate it, thanks.
Any other questions from the committee or things that the commission would like us to know about this bill or like us to be considering?
The only thing that I would add to is that I think that this bill also has a measure that it didn't have before of accountability. And Melody mentioned the fact that we are doing these emblematic cases, which emblematic means kind of symbolic cases, stories that have been like kind of in the news about discrimination against people in the state of Vermont, not just recently, but throughout time, right? And so we spent quite a bit of time, like 3-4 hour meetings, really synthesizing these cases and going over them with the public. And the public gave us their input. And one of the primary things that they requested was that the state be accountable. And that was one of the emerging things, is accountability. And so one of the things we're asking here is, in this mechanism for appointing another commissioner was also accountability for us as commissioners as well. So we want to do more than just talk about accountability. We want to be about accountability. So I think that that is in the legislation as well, that there's a mechanism in there for evaluation for us. Am I right, Michelle? I'm right about that?
It is in here. I'm trying to figure out which section. I believe it's section 5.
Yeah.
Looking at Ian, I think it's section 5.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that. And the reason that I wanted to highlight that is because of the feedback that we're getting from the public about state laws and policies, and the way that, you know, those state laws and policies have impacted the communities that are directly outlined in our legislation. And that the emerging themes are is primarily accountability, and we must also exemplify that.
Sorry, I know this.
It's on page 6 of 12, section 5.
It's
I don't know.
actually section 6.
Oh, section
I was
6.
gonna say.
Yep. Removal or reprimand.
Oh, the first one.
Sorry,
Yeah.
for the record, Damien Leonard, Office of Legislative Counsel. So there's removal or reprimand of commissioners for misconduct, which allows the selection panel to remove a commissioner for incompetence, failure to discharge their duties, malfeasance, illegal acts, or other actions that would substantially or materially harm the credibility of the commission or its ability to carry out its work. And a reprimand or remove. So that's, you kind of got, it's not a all or nothing sort of level of accountability. There's the ability to say, this was harmful to the commission, but we don't believe it warrants removal. So yeah, there is that mechanism in there. So it's not like a regular performance review, but it is a mechanism where if one of the commissioners does something that really is harmful to the credibility of the commission, there's a mechanism to address that and hopefully restore the credibility.
Not that I think I'm going to do anything wrong, y'all. But I think it's a good model for other commissions as well. Like, as you are thinking about your own laws, like I'm thinking about other commissions as well. And I'm hoping that this turns into something that is included in the future in other spaces.
That is so wonderful.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Often we model integrity by holding ourselves accountable to that, not because we think we're going to do something wrong. So I really appreciate you modeling that for all of us. Any other questions?
Do you have any questions?
I don't think so. I want to thank you all for being here and for the really important work you do. Feel free to hang out. We're going to hear from 2 more witnesses today. about the bill. Our next witness is, and if you have to go, that is also okay, but do feel free to stay with us. Our next witness is Lisa Loomis.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I don't know if you're able to come on camera, but right now we can't see you, and if you're not able, that is okay.
My video card is currently not participating.
Understood. Well, if you want to just introduce yourself for the record and let us know what you'd like us to know about this bill.
That's a great line if one doesn't want to be seen. My video card isn't working. Sounds great. Yeah, that sounds kind of cool.
Well, thank you all for allowing me to comment on behalf of both the Valley Reporter, of which I'm the co-owner and editor, and as well as the Vermont Press Association, where I'm the president. The Press Association, as many of you know, represents the interests of about 4 dozen daily and non-daily newspapers providing news to Vermonters. The Press Association is deeply concerned on behalf of its members throughout the state, but also the general public, that there is a new effort to make state government less transparent and potentially give very special treatment to the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission. H 649 is problematic in many ways. It has been improved. There have been improvements to it. Previous versions did include a provision allowing for seeking hearings, secret hearings, which we obviously objected to. The VPA has always opposed adding any new exemptions for closed-door executive sessions to Vermont's open meeting law. This is why any special effort to customize the state's open meeting law to the desires of the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission is very alarming. There's no other commission in the state that gets this kind of preferential treatment. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a publicly funded body, and taxpayers have the right to observe and participate in all of its works and its hearings. If it's difficult to avoid having a quorum with only 3 members, the logical thing to do is add more members. And we would urge the commissioners to talk to some 3-member boards, if they have not already, to understand how they're able to operate within the law before we consider any reduction of open government and accountability in Vermont. The Truth and Recreation Commission proposal to create an entirely new category of public hearing, a closed or restricted hearing, we feel is a violation of open meeting law and Vermont's Constitution, which enshrines and protects free speech. To create a new special category of hearings where public voice is muted is abhorrent and flies in the face of open and transparent government. People have a right to participate in the public process and in government. There's no need to provide special treatment for one state commission. To assert a vague and undefined threat as a reason for holding a closed hearing is disingenuous and a dangerous precedent with very real ability for abuse. If victims of rape, sexual abuse, and domestic violence testify in open court, what is this?
Yes.
Oh, we can hear you. If you're hearing stuff in the hallway, it's just we have loud people in the
Oh, okay.
hallway.
Yeah.
We can
Sorry.
hear you.
If victims of rape, sexual abuse, and domestic violence can testify in open court, what is this commission hearing that is so much worse than those crimes? In these closed or restricted hearings, the list of those who may attend now includes journalists. With all due respect, throwing us the bone of allowing the press into these closed hearings is not enough to satisfy the open meeting law, which provides access for the public. Does the press being able to attend mean journalists will be able to truthfully and accurately report what they're hearing? We reiterate our concerns that the work of the commission is not subject to the open meeting law. The proposed bill also states this.
She's just gonna make it.
Senator Clarkson's just gonna ask them to be a little bit more quiet.
Okay, I have a question. This is notwithstanding, the proposed bill states this. Notwithstanding any provision of Chapter 5, Subchapter 2 of this title, the deliberations of a quorum or more of the members of the commission shall not be subject to Vermont open meeting law. Could you explain to the public what decisions are being made by this quorum and who can appeal them? And how will people know hearings are being held that are later being deliberated? In a quasi-judicial hearing, all data, evidence, opinions, and testimony is heard in open session before a DRB or an Act 250 commission or some other quasi-judicial board deliberates. What is the definition of deliberations for this bill? The text refers to 1 VSA 313, which talks about deliberative bodies conducting quasi-judicial hearings, like a DRB. Does the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hold quasi-judicial hearings? We firmly feel that the commission needs to do all of its work and spending of taxpayer money in the open. The VPA is prepared to testify against the bill in the future and is glad to continue its long-standing relationship with the legislature in its goal to make Vermont one of the most transparent states. During the hearing earlier today, we heard a lot about accountability. Where is the accountability to the public and open government? I think it's important to note that lack of accountability and transparency is part of what got us here in the first place. We appreciate your time and willingness to take our concerns seriously, and we're here to make and keep government accessible to the public. Thank you for your time today. The text of this bill is different from what we testified on in February, and as we familiarize our members with this version, we may have further comments.
Wonderful, thank you. Is your testimony today in writing, and have you shared it with Olivia, our committee assistant?
I will when I fix the typos.
Perfect, I appreciate that. I did just want to, so we do have a couple of other boards and commissions that are exempt from open meeting law. The Public Utilities Commission is one that comes to mind, and they are completely exempt from open meeting law, not just a small carve out. So I do this, there are others that have exemptions. Are there other questions or thoughts from committee members? Senator Clarkson.
Lisa, I guess I'd ask you, how would you solve the sort of thorny challenge the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioners are trying to solve in this special exemption in terms of developing an atmosphere of complete trust and safety?
Yeah.
If there has, how would you develop that so how would you develop that in the open meeting context?
Well, respectfully, I'm a journalist. It's not my job to develop a commission.
I know you're a journalist.
That are, well,
you're also asking us not to do this.
but
So,
I believe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so I'm just curious if you have have some thoughts about it. I mean,
honesty and truth and clarity and open government are the easiest thing ever, because then you don't have to carve out exceptions and you don't have to make special rules. The restricted meetings and the provision to allow the restricted meetings could be palatable if there weren't so many other carve outs. If I am alleging that I have been the subject of racism, and I say Bill was uttered racist remarks towards me or treated me such and such a way or discriminated against me, I believe that Bill in our country under our Constitution has a right to hear me say that and to face me. And so I know that this is very important and very sensitive work that the commission is doing, and it's long overdue, but more secrecy and more not airing things out in public isn't going to make it better.
right.
To Senator Clarkson's point, I think it's incredibly important in a moment in time where there is incredible lack of trust in government, as well as incredible threats to safety of people doing hard work, and that we have to work to create a balance between safety and transparency. I sit in this committee pretty frequently arguing for increased transparency and accountability, much to the chagrin of some of my committee members.
This is an interesting one.
It is an interesting one. And, in our open meeting law, we made some efforts to try and acknowledge that also there are very real threats to people's safety that need to be accounted for as well. And I don't know that I know exactly the right path forward, but I think that we have to acknowledge both of those things and find a way to balance them.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to get at with my question to Lisa, is how do we,
Yeah.
how do we do that? And I think that's what we have to figure out.
Yes.
But we just like input from smart people, thoughtful people, good ideas on how we can balance that effect.
Yeah, and if you've seen it work, if there's examples you've seen where it's worked.
Well, rape victims testify in open court, as do domestic violence victims, and certainly they are facing threats. Their safety we've already seen their safety has been impacted.
That's true.
Certainly that is true, and I don't know that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is dealing with people's freedom interests, so I think we're dealing with kind of slightly different
Yeah.
consequences of the actions taken in those spaces. Senator, oh, go ahead, sorry, Lisa.
Well, I guess I'm still unclear as to what the definition of deliberations is, and are these quasi judicial hearings? And what actually is happening in these? So if these are not quasi judicial hearings, then why are the deliberations of the commissioners exempt from open meeting law?
These are not quasi judicial hearings. We have heard from counsel that, under the open meeting law definition, that is not yet law, but hopefully will be law in S-55. These are the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is an advisory board. And therefore, is able to meet fully remotely for all of their meetings if they so choose, or fully in person or hybrid. So I can answer that question.
Well, then the copy of the bill that was forwarded to me very specifically states that it is in accordance with 1 VSA 313. Which,
Yeah, and as I had said earlier, I think there will need to be some changes to the bill to harmonize it with S-55 should that pass. Because while this bill was in process in the House, this committee was actively working on updating and changing open meeting law. Damian, go ahead.
To clarify, so the reference to 1 VSA 313 says that executive sessions do not need to be live streamed or video recorded. So I haven't, so that's not the actual meetings. That's just referring to executive sessions. So they have to be in an open meeting, both go into executive session. And just like another public body, the executive session is it's a moment where the public is not present, and then they have to come out before they do any business. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not, they don't have the 1 VSA 313 reference is just a cross reference to our existing executive session provisions. The definition of deliberations is in 1 VSA 310 subdivision 2. And that means the weighing, examining, and discussing the reasons for or against an act or decision, but expressly excludes taking evidence and the arguments of parties. So just want to clarify the two cross references, just so that we're all on the same page here.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Senator Watson, good question.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about just clarifying your concern or objection. So with the closed or limited hearing, because they are recorded, they are still available to the public, but your objection is that the public is not able to participate in those hearings.
That is correct.
Okay.
The public is not able to participate in real time, like I could at the select board, or somebody could at the select board, or the planning commission, or the development review board, or an Act 250 hearing.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, I know, at least in Montpelier, we operated in a way where we took, public comment on every issue as it came up. But I know some bodies don't, like the school board in Montpelier, they only allow public comment at the very beginning. And they are, it's quite limited. Commissioners may respond or they may not respond, and then they go on to their meeting, and that is the only opportunity that the public has to participate. In that, I mean, if there was a limited capacity in which, similarly people could participate, even if it was in a limited way, such as, what the school board does, as I was just mentioning, would that satisfy your concerns?
We'd have to poll our members. Our basic position is that the public has a right to participate. And I do understand that school boards set their own very specific rules, and and they meet the letter of the open meeting they meet the letter of the law by allowing that public comment during open session, at the beginning of their meeting.
Right. Okay, thank you, that, I just want to make sure that I was understanding your concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee thoughts, questions? Okay. Thank you, Lisa, for being here and sharing the Vermont Press Association's concerns. Our next witness is Wendy Mays. If you want to introduce yourself for the record and let us know what you'd like us to know.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Wendy Mays, and I am the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Broadcasters. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on behalf of Vermont's trusted local television and radio broadcast newsrooms, who are dedicated to keeping the public informed with fact-based, non-biased reporting. We understand that there are sections of H649 that need to pass in order for the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission to do their work, including a process by which a replacement commissioner can be appointed. But there are other sections of the bill that are not critical to job performance, and it's those sections that where we have concerns. While deliberating H649, in particular sections 9 and 10, I urge your committee to take into consideration the intent of Act 128, which created the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Section 1 of Act 128 states that the intent of the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission, among other things, is to, quote, examine and establish a public record of institutional, structural, and systemic discrimination in Vermont caused or permitted by state laws and policies. Yet, sections 9 and 10 of H649 propose that elements of the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission work be done confidentially and exempted from open meeting law. So how can a public record of discrimination be established if the public does not have access to information that led to the recommendations in the Commission's final report? So Section 9, subsection D1 on page 19 says that any individual can have their interview kept confidential. Since there's nothing to prevent every single person from invoking confidentiality, the risk is very high that there will be no public record of any interviews. But the same section goes on to say all interview records shall only be available to the public in an that's a tough one, anonymized form. Say that fast 3 times. Since that part protects the interviewee's identity from being released publicly, why is there a need for the extra step of making it confidential, which is what results in no public record? So we encourage your committee to consider striking out the first part about confidentiality, since identities are already kept from the public thanks to the second part. Moving on to section 10, subsection B1 on page 23, it says that deliberations of a quorum or more of members of the commission shall not be subject to the Vermont open meeting law. It's our understanding that the reason for this request is because anytime the 2 commissioners want to discuss business, it triggers open meeting law. So exempting them would make it convenient. Exempting this commission simply because it only has 3 members and it is just not a valid reason to suspend transparency, one of the most important elements of democracy. In addition, exempting this commission sets precedent for every other 3-member board, council, or commission who will likely want the same exemption. It just creates a very slippery slope. In ending, I just want to, sometimes it's helpful to present a scenario of how unintended consequences can negatively impact what's otherwise a very noble initiative. So let's say that H649 passes as proposed and the commission goes on, they do their work and they present their final report with the recommendations to the state legislature. It's now April 15th, 2027. And I am a member of the public who has questions about how they reached some of the recommendations in their report. So I do a public records request and I find out that 99% of the interviews that were conducted are confidential. So there's no way to verify any of the information they claim to have heard. I, as a member of the public, then say, okay, then I will watch the commissioners discuss and deliberate about the experiences and stories they heard that led to their recommendations. But then I'm told, sorry, there's no public recordings of their discussions or deliberations because they were exempt from open meeting law. So it seems ironic that the intent of the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission is to get out in the open and shine a light on discrimination caused by state laws and policies. Yet the commission is asking for exemptions and special rules that would make it so the experiences and stories they discover remain veiled behind this cloak of confidentiality. So again, I just want to reiterate the intent of Act 128 in creating the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is listed among other things as to examine and, most importantly, establish a public record of institutional, structural, and systemic discrimination in Vermont caused or permitted by state laws and policies. So because subsection D1 of section 9 and subsection B1 of section 10 seem to contradict the intent of Act 128, that's why the Vermont Association of Broadcasters opposes those subsections of H649. And we urge your committee to please consider removing them from the bill. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Any thoughts, questions?
Okay. No, go ahead. You're chairing it. You started. First, I just want to apologize to all the witnesses for not being in the room for your testimony. I had to be in another committee on on a different bill that this committee has spent a significant amount of time on. I will watch all of your testimony, and I ask everybody to provide their testimony in writing as well, because that would be really helpful for me, and I'm sure the rest of the committee, especially if you're requesting or advocating for changes in the bill, like you just did, Wendy. Making sure I can understand which sections you're talking about, and if there are any of those, or on the flip side, if you're really wanting to preserve sections, especially calling them out, that would be helpful to me since I missed the testimony and we have another member who's not here. So I just wanted to say that, and apologies for missing the other witnesses, but thank you all for being here, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Senator Biegoski.
Yes, thank you. I do want to give the commissioners and the general counsel for the commission a chance to weigh in on any of the changes being proposed. If they would like, well, then you can also bring them back to do that at another point if they would prefer that, because I know it's kind of on the fly that I'm putting that out there, but I do want to give you that opportunity. Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, while they're thinking, I'm just curious. Did the three of you discuss or consider, proceeding, in a fully open fashion, and then having the ability to shut it down in case it got ugly or if something was inappropriate, or because that's of course always an avenue that is available to anybody if a meeting is spins in a direction that is unacceptable.
Well, I mean, I would say that's what we do. And that's what we've been doing, and that has so far worked.
And you
And
haven't
that
had
moment-
another incident since the beginning.
We were looking at coming up in July, having to be in a physical location, which is a different
Right, so now you could be.
bird altogether when you receive material threats against people's
Right.
lives. So that's why we asked for it. A closed meeting, by the way, doesn't mean that the public can't witness it. They're live streamed in and they are witnessing it. So that's one piece of it. Yeah, and I would say something further about when people tell their stories, why it's important. A public meeting is just so much different than the court of laws. And it's funny in the sense that before I had this job, I spent about 30 years creating litigation clinics for victims of domestic and sexual violence. So I was there thousands of times when people testified about domestic and sexual violence. And the reason that the perpetrators were there, or those accused of perpetrating were there, is a matter of due process and equal protection, because they stood to lose something, as I think, as you mentioned. whether they're gonna later have a criminal trial or they're just looking at having a restraining order or whatever that may be. Folks talking about what's happened to them in the state is a matter that I feel like the state wants to know about and is interested in fixing and going forward without that.
So what I would like to be able to respond to some of the misconceptions that were put forth in the previous testimony. We're not a judicial body. We are not going to be determining whether somebody's story is true or not. We do not even anticipate creating a space where public can comment on somebody else's story. This is somebody else's truth. It is not, we are going to be holding sessions where people tell their truths. It's not a back and forth in terms of somebody's going to say, well, prove it to me. And we make a determination on whether or not that happened, right? We're not a judicial body. So that's one of the misconceptions I feel like I need to, articulate here. The second thing is like, in terms of other three-person body, like a select board, for example, they're not full-time employees. We are working, we are 40 hours a week trying to do operational things, right? Like, and work around how we are making decisions. And we do have public meetings when we do need to make a decision. As Melody stated in our testimony, we have had these public meetings for quite some time now, and I haven't seen any of these participants in those meetings. So the public has a way to be engaged in our work, and so does the press. The only reason that we're asking for sort of this tool, again, a tool in our toolbox that we don't even know if we're going to be needing to use, right? We just want to be able to think about all of the safety precautions and have this at our availability so that the people who are, again, telling their stories, not being judged by those stories, can be safe to do that. We are now creating safety protocols and accessibility protocols and language access protocols. That's what we're doing right now. And so that is all kind of operational things. But when we do get to the point where we are hearing stories, again, this is an exercise of listening. And so I just want to emphasize that we are not here to have public input into other people's truths. The public can observe. The public can learn from those truths. And there won't be a scenario, I can guarantee, I'm saying that in front of you all and God and YouTube and everybody, there won't be a scenario where people's stories are not there for the public record. That's the whole point of this. We just need this tool in the toolbox, and we don't even know if we're going to need to use it. But if it does, we don't need to go through this whole process again. So I just wanted to just put that out because I think that there's this like this misconception about what we're doing and that we aren't a judicial body. We are just going to be at the end submitting a report. Whether or not you even take those recommendations is a whole nother like subject. It's a whole nother like bridge to cross once we don't have these positions anymore.
Right.
So again, you guys will actually ultimately be the decision makers on what to do with our report. We don't make any decisions.
We also are not subject to open meeting law. Senator Watson, thank you, Commissioner Schultz.
Yeah, thank you. I want to just check about the process. I mean, anybody can request to testify. Now, maybe testify is maybe not the right word, but share their story, right? So I'm just thinking about, the case where, maybe somebody feels accused, right? And they want to defend their name, let's say, that they could come and say, I want to share my experience of whatever happened, and they would be permitted to do so, maybe just not in the same and not in like a back and forth kind of setting and not in a, I'm thinking about the example I gave where, the public has, like at the school board meetings, right? You have a couple minutes or whatever for public comment at the beginning of the meeting. That's a limited way to get, if there's something on the agenda, somebody wants to talk about it, it's a way to get that feedback in kind of in a concise way. But this doesn't even have to be a concise way. Someone could just say, I would like to share my story, and then they could do that. And that is that a correct understanding?
I mean, our focus is going to be the communities listed in Act 129, 128, who have been affected by laws and policies by the state. So
Yeah.
we likely don't have the intention to blame certain individuals. We're looking at the state agencies, laws, policies, all these things that individuals have, yes, been a part of creating and enforcing, but they are not the people who are being directly blamed, right? They are part of a system and systems that have caused harm to individuals. If there is a case where somebody is particularly named, it could be a police officer, for example, we certainly want to be able to create a space where that police officer can be heard as well, but it might not be in the same room as the victim or the person who's telling their story, right? We haven't really, again, put our whole plan together and how that works, but certainly we have thought about how do we bring in the piece where reconciliation happens?
Yeah.
Right? Because right now we're talking about truths. And so how we are getting to reconciliation is very individual. And so that is why we're trying to be intentional about everything we do and think about every potential risk that our intended communities that we are trying to uplift in intended communities, and also hold the story, hold the truths of those who have been named, if you will. Yeah. So it's a difficult thing to do. And if you look at, and one of our tasks for the last year has been among states starting a whole entirely new office within state government, which in and of itself is mind-blowing. But on top of that is do research, international research with other TRCs across the world who have really had to already sit with this idea of what do we do with the perpetrator, if you will, right? So we're still figuring out what that might look like, but we do know that our highest value is the protection and safety of those telling their stories.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I don't know everything that's been discussed because I wasn't in the room, but I'm wondering, you alluded to it, we passed S55 in here and there's still time to go. We've already covered this. Okay, I'll lock up the video. Because there are things that we need to.
Yes.
Harmonize. We did harmonize, okay. And then, I guess for, either Commissioner Schultz or Commissioner Mackin, I'm wondering what your response is to the concern that if too much of your work is done confidentially, that whatever end result you come up with will not have the credibility that you might want it to. I wonder what your response is to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're creating a strategic plan, as we said, now. In that plan involves having forums. Those would be public. Those would be one way of collecting testimonies. We will have several ways of collecting testimonies. And there will be people who want to talk publicly. There's not a scenario that I can think of in which everybody would, which all of the things and all of the stories would be off limits to everyone. So I don't even imagine a scenario of that happening, but I'll let Michelle talk to a little bit more about the confidentiality piece.
Yeah, I did want to get to that, and I know that there's a concern that people are telling their stories confidentially. And I think when we think about like our societal value of why we want people to tell their stories, right? Because there's healing, going forward and moving in a better direction. That is the value. And in the past, when society has that value, for example, it's so important for people to have hotlines to call, right? Or counselors to talk to and be able to have that confidential, because the value of society, we know how much healing and how much harm can be avoided by having those things. And of course, there's always things that can cut into that, like child abuse reporting, for example, right? There's a limit to how much things can be confidential because we have other things coming in. But it is the value of people being able to come forward, say hard things, do hard things, and then to be able to have the healing and the better direction that comes from that, which is why it's so important for people to have confidentiality when they talk about things like sexual assault, for example.
Senator Clarkson, did you also have a question or has it been?
No, I just apologize, just that preserved my head, so.
Okay, take care of your
So
heart.
I'm listening, I'm doing what Mia and Melody want us to do, I'm actively listening.
One of the things I was struck by while you were speaking, and some of what you mentioned, Mia, as well, is the parallel nature to restorative justice practices in which we actually do create confidentiality for some of these discussions because we have a recognition of the power of that healing that can happen when people are able to be very open and very honest because they're not in a fishbowl. And so I think that like I said, to start with, I think there is some work in here to align this with S55 and figure out how S55 impacts what you're asking for. And I really recognize the work that you're doing as being different than the work perhaps a select board might be doing, or, even some of our other advisory bodies. So thank you for helping me make those connections.
And one of the other reasons that we're in this state, like I think that it was brought up by somebody else here, was that, right, we got into this position by not being able to have whatever public input. When we're talking about marginalized communities, we're talking about Black, brown people, disabled people who have a history and a present day reality of being oppressed, and there's power and there's privilege and there's all these things that are happening in a moment. That does not create a place of safety for them to allow sort of a back and forth and a situation where they're having to once again prove what happened to them. That is, again, antithetical to what we are here for.
Senator Hardy.
Michelle or Damien, I don't know, have you looked at other truth and reconciliation commissions that are, and what their sort of confidentiality and open meeting laws, how they work through these issues?
So we did that a little bit when we set up the commission. The answer really is that it's across the board. So some commissions have, like a large staff and they have a prosecutorial function. For example, South Africa, after apartheid ended, totally different scale than this. Other commissions are literally community volunteer efforts. And so it's across the board. I think what you see in the original bill is kind of the compromise where the legislature came down last biennium. And then what you see in the bill in front of you is what the House has proposed. as their adjustments to that compromise. I do think it might make sense to take a step back. I have to leave in a couple minutes, but to look at S55 and then look at whether that changes the thinking around some of these issues in a way. I mean, obviously the policy questions are up to all of you. But I think there may be some question with the way that S55 is enabling. And I don't know S55 in and out at this point. I've just had a chance to glance at it briefly. But if the changes that it makes around remote meetings might make changes for what the commission sees that it needs, and whether those changes may also satisfy the Press Association and the Association of Broadcasters' concerns about transparency and access, because I can't speak for the parties here, but it is possible that with the changes in the law in S55, that you may actually be closer
Yeah,
than you think you are.
and also the local
but-
incident that we added to S55 is another tool to use that analogy.
Right, so I think that maybe that would be a place to step back to, but I do, unfortunately, I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around the world, there may be a great example somewhere,
Mhm.
but I remember them being sort of across the spectrum in terms of how public they were
Mhm.
and what they did that was public, and in some cases where they had a prosecutorial function, then there was for sure this due process. I think it was Ms. Loomis who mentioned the ability to face your accuser.
Mhm.
Where that was for sure a part of it because people were being accused of breaking the law.
Mhm.
And there was a function in the commission, I think with some other commissions where they're dealing with historical traumatic community events, there's less of that. Although they may still do it in a public forum. But I would have to look back. There were literally hundreds of pages of material that
Yeah,
the House
Well-
looked back at a few years ago.
I think at this point, it might be, yeah, 'cause we're gonna start losing some people in just a few minutes. We will, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think we're gonna take a look at S55, together with this, and I will work with Damien and Tim on. Tim is doing S55 now, right?
Yeah.
On, sort of seeing if we can do some kind of chart or something that we could look at together. And also, I think it might be helpful to have a little bit, back up a little bit more to Damien and get a little bit more history about, and maybe you already did this and I just have to watch, but the bill, Truth and Reconciliation original legislation and some of the, looking at that, because
Yeah, we have not done that.
yeah,
already.
we should do that. So, we will undoubtedly have you all back at some point when after we've done a little bit more of our own kind of internal. I mean, we would do it in public, but it would be internal to the committee. The irony there. Of trying to reconcile and getting a little bit more information for ourselves about how the legislation may or may not dovetail. But we will have you all back, and I will watch everything and make sure I'm up to speed on what you all said. Thank you so much for
Thank you for having us.
yeah, and thank
It was
you.
great.
Yeah, and thank you for your work on this really tough commission and issue. It's really appreciated for our state. So thanks for being here, and we will see you again soon. Thanks, Wendy and Lisa and Melody as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.